Hey, everybody, thank you for coming back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. It's also theclinicaltrials.guru. Thanks for watching. Thanks for checking out the podcast, the blog. This is going to be a shorter video, and I've been really thinking about using LinkedIn a lot more than I have. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm using it a lot as it is, but I've been thinking about using it even more because a lot of the best content and the best questions come from LinkedIn. And I'm actually thinking about making a Clinical Trials Guru LinkedIn group. So if you would find any value out of it, let me know, and I'll set one up. I mean, if enough people ask me to do it, I'll do it. And so far, there's been some people that have asked me to do it. So anyways, one of the questions I got on LinkedIn from a group that I'm in was in regards to medical records. So I'm just going to read you the question. I was a coordinator on 2 studies from 2008 to 2012. So for those of you watching in the future, it is now 2014, okay, just to give you some context. With an investigational drug that has been FDA approved since mid-2012. I tried to contact the people associated with these studies, and they are either gone by now or not answering me. I recall reading in a few places that source and reg docs for a study should be held until the drug has been on the market for 2 years. Would it be safe to destroy them, or should I hang on to them longer? Any feedback is welcome. So the problem with these kind of things is that there's always something else that you hear is what you're supposed to do. I'm dealing with this now. As a matter of fact, look at this. Iron Mountain, for those of you who are familiar with records and archives, okay? So I'm very familiar with this thing, and there's different reasons why a research site would want to return study records. One is the PI retires. I mean, if you've done this long enough, as is the case here in my case, PIs retire. They don't necessarily want to take the records home with them, understandably so. And, but they also don't want to be responsible for the records anymore should an FDA audit happen at the site. So in those cases, what I've done is I've contacted the sponsors, and because we've had so many different sponsors, I've had a lot of interesting answers. Many of them agreed to take them back. And I also asked them how long should we keep them, how long are we supposed to keep them. They all say to refer to your contract. Now, a lot of the times the contracts will state hold them for 15, 20 years. That might not be a requirement, actually. And there's some people who answer these questions on the LinkedIn group. One person said regulations state that you can destroy the documents 2 years after the NDA has been filed, and up to 15 years after the study closes. So that's a lot of, I mean, it's either 2 years after the NDA has been filed or 15 years after the study closes. So it's a pretty wide range there. If you ask different sponsors, they'll tell you different things. Most of the sponsors agreed to take back the records. Some of them insisted, and obviously I won't mention who, insisted that we give them on to the new doctor who's taking over the site. And I understand why. I mean, the sponsor at that point doesn't want the responsibility of an FDA audit, and then they don't want to attract the FDA to their place, to their headquarters or their facilities, just to audit the records for a particular site. There's a few other issues too when it comes to records. One of them being the cost of the storage. So you just saw the Iron Mountain box. It's not exactly cheap. I think for the most basic plan, it's like $130 a month. And some of those sites that have a lot more records than mine, I have a couple small sites. I would imagine they would pay up to $300,000 a month. I mean, it just depends on the size of your site. An option that I would choose to do is, like I said, again, most sponsors accepted the records back. Some don't. Some don't give you a clear response. you can always just send it back to them and say, look, the PI retired, or another reason to send back archives, maybe even earlier than you actually are required to, is if the company, if your site is going out of business or is restructuring and there's a new ownership group coming in. Although the new ownership group is a little more complicated than that because they should take over the responsibilities from the previous company. But if a company is going out of business entirely, that is another good reason, from what I've been told at least from sponsors, to send back the archives. So as a general rule of thumb, I would say 5 years after the study closeout visit is what you should do. But of course, don't destroy any documents without talking to each sponsor first. Because a lot of the times, I mean, it's just as simple as asking them to take it back. And they will. And I'm a big believer in the 80-20 principle, meaning 80% of your results can be triggered by 20% of your actions. And that's what I found in my case in one of the sites that we're dissolving because the PI is retiring. I found that 80% of the sponsors agreed to take back their records. So now I'm just dealing with a few 20% where it's still unclear. So it's still a lot easier than just going one at a time through each study. But unfortunately, that is what you might have to do. As always, consult someone on this. You shouldn't take this as legal advice. It's just anecdotal experience that I have, and just reading through other LinkedIn members' comments in this group page. They all say different things. Every sponsor will say something else. So it's really up to you to decide what you want to do. And at the end of the day, the safest thing to do is to contact the sponsor and say, hey, we need to get rid of these things. We can't hold them indefinitely. Thank you to the Clinical Trial Group producers: South Coast Clinical Trials, Sarah Elizabeth Siegler; Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, PT&R; Erdhart Clinical Research, Tradestone LLC; Breakthrough Clinical Trials, Cool Carney Law Firm; Biopharm Systems, Zymewire; Mozio; St. Paul Medical Research Center; Investigators Research Group; Phlebotomy Services; Atria Clinical Research Management; Rheumatic Disease Clinical Research Center; Clinexus Research LLC; and Coastal Connecticut Research LLC. Thank you very much. And this is Dan from theclinicaltrials.guru. Take care.